Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming for this Earth talk, which I will share with SUDEEP, and in a minute I will introduce SUDEEP. But before we have Earth talks, there will be a little music, and we begin with music. And our musician in residence, Jason, is here to give us that surprise. You didn't know that there would be music, did you? So this is a surprise performance. So Jason, yeah.
Hello. My name is Jason Singh, and I am the artist in residence here at Dartington for the next year or so. And yeah, boy. And I do lots of different work using and working in collaboration with sound and music. And one of the things I do is I mimic wildlife and nature. I'm a beatboxer, and I specialise in weirdness. Yeah. And so the other day I met SUDEEP for the first time after having read his books over the years, and SUDEEP said, "Why don't you come and do a gig performance before we start?" So I was like, "Yeah, could do that." And it's been weird as well because I've not done this for about 2 years now with the whole lockdown and stuff. So this is actually one of the first gigs I'm doing for you. So I feel very privileged and honoured. Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you for being. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice one. Shaking of the hands.
That was absolutely wonderful. Welcome again. It is my great pleasure to introduce my new friend. I already feel a good friendship with SUDEEP. He's an eminent poet, has written many books, poetry books, also a writer in general, and also a great photographer, which I discovered only today. And it was my great pleasure to read his latest book, Anthropocene. And in the context of climate change and how humans are dominating the age of our time and our age, it's a wonderful book. And when I received information from Prabhu, the publisher, Prabhu Guptara, who is also here, and in the end he will say a few words, that SUDEEP is likely to be in England. So I said, come and do an Earth talk at Schumacher College. So this is a wonderful opportunity. So first of all, I would like to invite SUDEEP to say a few words and then read something from his book and introduce his ideas about Anthropocene and climate change. And then following that, I will say a few words about my thoughts about climate change. And then we will have a little dialogue between two of us. And then I'll open it for the question answer. All of you can ask. Speak loudly. I don't know if there's a microphone available, but it's a small room. We can hear each other. So ask questions. So we are hoping to finish by 9:30. So without much ado, I would like to invite SUDEEP to speak to us. SUDEEP.
Thank you very much. I think it's a really hard act to follow after all the sort of massive attack. Pink Floyd, set to Rag Teen Tal. Fantastic, Jason. Brilliant, very good, thank you. It's a lovely sort of tonality and soundscape to follow, really. I'll jump straight into the book. The book is called, of course, Anthropocene, and it deals with climate change, contagion, and consolation. And the reason the consolation part of the book is very, very important is because there's so much toxicity in the world that I wanted the book, the final message of the book, to end in positivity and hope and endearment and love and happiness, things that we all are searching for all the time. And it's within us. You just have to look within to find it. But the first poem is called Disembodied, and it's set in Delhi. But the themes and what I talk about in the poem, you'll of course relate to. Disembodied. My body carved from abandoned bricks of a ruined temple, from minaret shards of an old mosque, from slate remnants of a medieval church apse, from soil tilled by my ancestors. My bones don't fit together correctly as they should. The searing ultraviolet light from aurora borealis patches and etch corrects my orientation. Magnetic pulses prove potent. My flesh sculpted from fruits of the tropics, blood from coconut water, skin colored by brown bark of Indian teak. My lungs, fueled by Delhi's insidious toxic air, echo asthmatic sounds, a new vinyl dub remix. Our universe, where radiation germinates from human follies, where contamination persists from mistrust, where pleasures of sex are merely a sport, where everything is ambition, everything is desire, everything is nothing, nothing and everything. White light everywhere, but no one can recognize its hue. No one knows that there is color in it, all possible colors. Body worshipped not for its blessings, but its contour, artificial shape shaped by Nautilus, skin moistened by L'Oreal, and not by season's first rains, skeleton strength not shaped by earthquakes or slow molded by fearless forest fires. Ice caps are rapidly melting, too fast to arrest glacial slide. In the near future, there will be no water left, or too much water that is undrinkable, excess water that will drown us all. Disembodied floats, afloat like Noah's Ark. No GPS, no pole star navigation, no fossil fuel to burn away. Just maps with empty grids and names of places that might exist. Already, there's too much traffic on the road. Unpeopled hollow metal shells without brakes swerve about, directionless, looking for an elusive compass. Thank you, that's very kind. The next one is called Obituary, and I wish I could show this on the screen, but during the first wave of the pandemic, the New York Times ran two sets of front pages. One was just completely black. I mean, what more can you say? And the other one is basically names of people who died of the pandemic, and it's just their names and nothing else. And this particular poem, of course, is dated during that time. Takes the epigraph is from the New York Times headline, and I quote: They were not simply names on a list, they were us. Death knell peal, numbers multiply, virus ravages us one by one. Newspaper columns loom unsteady ghostly apparitions on broadsheets. Name, age, date of death, tall epitaphs in fine print. Ink spills, bleeds dark, newsprint blotting out a wheezing breath. No amount of hygiene ritual enables our lungs to resuscitate. Our lives, micro-point-sized fonts on an ever-inflating pandemic list. Black specks, fugitive lonely numbers, the deceased on an official roster. Another sick, another dying, another dead. Yes, they were us. The next poem is called Hope, Light Leaks. Again, the photographer side of my life kicks in very often. Sometimes it's very distracting. So I had gone to the loo at night and forgot to put the light off in the bathroom, and I tried to close the door, and of course must have left it ajar. And there was this little crack on top of the door where the light was escaping through the schism, and that got me going. Poetry is a kind of a difficult thing because, if you don't write it, if you don't arrest it in mid-flight, then often you think that, you can do it the next day, but it just disappears, it just flies away. There's something magical about it. It doesn't really make for a great love relationship when your partner is in the duvet and you sort of stomp off and go to the study and write something silly, But that's the thing, that's the sacrifice you have to make. Hope, light leaks. And it opens with an epigraph from Martin Luther King Jr., and I quote: "Darkness cannot drive our darkness. Only light can do that." Late at night, light leaks spilling beyond the door's rectangle edge. A cleaving schism, its shape a partial crucifix, a new resurrection. Light's pain waxes, wanes, viral loads expands, contracts. Photons spill, conduction sparks, light slow removes cataracts veil. In this blackness, lives matter. I read a poem called Language because not because language is intrinsic to the kind of work I do, but language is a great divider, a great healer, a great glue. Language is misused, of course, fake news, cancel culture, all sorts of things. So this particular poem, of course, talks about all that, but language is also fun, it's joyous, it's something to be celebrated. And there's no more joy when you can string a few words or phrases together and they dance beautifully and poetically. Then you've got the tone just pitch perfect, like a musician when you get everything just right and it just flies like that. I can't get his voice, my God. It's completely polyphonic. But there you go. This I should dedicate to you, because you're the man, Jason. Language, and it opens with an epigraph from Italo Calvino, and I quote, "Without translation, I would be limited to the borders of my own country. The translator is my most important ally." My typewriter is multilingual, its keys mysteriously calibrating my bipolar forked tongue. Black red silk ribbons, pools unwind as the carriage moves from right to left. In cursive hand, I write from left to right. My tongue was born promiscuous, speaking in many languages. My heart spoke another, my head yet another, the translation seamless. Oracles, ventricles pump blood, corpuscle-like alphabets, phrases, syntax, cross-fertilize my text, breathing life. Texture enriched, music, cadence spatially enhanced, osmotic, polyglottal, a polygamy of grammar. Letter forms dance, ligatures pirouette, ascenders and descenders, pitch perfect. Imagination isn't caged in speech. Speech cannot be caged in language. So I didn't realize that all the performers are all speakers or performers would be all Indian or Indian origin certainly. It was completely accidental. And when I was speaking to Jason outside, he said, she bumped into Satish and he said, just come and do this. And normally in the West, when I appear for programs, people are very, very anal about milliseconds and time, and the program has to be completely set in stone. But there's something wonderful about fluidity and camaraderie, and you just include whatever happens. So because you did the soundscape, Satish said, why don't we, actually it was Sarah who said, do you have any tech requirements? And I had only said, I just need a mic. But when she said that, and I said, actually I have a couple of songs that this songwriter and composer called Heather Shepard, she's a fairly well-known person in America. She got hold of this book and wrote to me saying that I'm so inspired that I'm going to make an album of songs and music videos inspired by poems from this. So I'll play you two somewhere in the middle of the reading. But the first one is called silence, because I think that's something that we need to inculcate within our system. The whole idea of centeredness, silence, and celebration of the absence of noise. So this is a film that's been made by a filmmaker based in Calcutta. And it fuses 3 of my poems as one composite little film. Have a look. After a long concert and after dinner, I find myself unexpectedly with you in my room. In this new space, finding oneself is wonderful. I was here and not here at the same time. Later I felt as if I had entered a story of an old familiar novel, a character I knew but had not met in flesh until now. You, me, and my winter's dream. Our mattress is the wide ocean, the crushed sheets, the waves. We sail together full blown. But during your long absences as our ships are docked on different shores, sometimes the bed dreams. I imagine the wet breaking the anchor loose, defying gravity, current, and electricity. As photons propel and burn, even the wild salted expands into a monument, a desire, permanent like the ocean bed, its pulses uncontrollably rocking. The waters, the bodies, the dreams. Silence has its own subtle color. Between each breath pause, heat simmers latent saliva, tongue entwined lisp. Here and there, errant clouds wait, yearning for rain, desire melting even silence to words. Words color bleed incarnadine as your lips whisper softly the secrets of your silence. Your fine chicken blouse, white, sheer, and almost transparent, cannot hide the quiet of your heartbeat on your wheat olive skin. The milk white flower adorning your hair sheds a solitary petal, just one. In that petal, silence blooms color. White, transparent white. Pure white silence. It's astonishing what people can do with words. I had no control over this. In fact, when the filmmaker approached me, she said, I said, I'm happy to read the poems out aloud and you can record the soundtrack. But she is this very feisty, mega alpha feminist. And when she got there to shoot me, she made me act, and I can't act for nuts. And I feel so constipated. And she said, don't worry, she took out her lipstick and this thing and started putting makeup. And I said, okay, you just sort of give in. And that's what they did. Okay. I read two poems. Followed by two music songs that you'll hear. This one's called That Is, spelled I.E. And it's a short poem, and my son, who never comes to any of my readings and, very sensible, I sent it to him and he said that, Baba, it's really beautiful, but I have no idea what you're talking about. But the fact that he got the fact that it was beautiful, that itself is quite something, that the fact that he found something like this beautiful. And I told him that, sometimes you just let the heart win over your head and let it just flow. Either the cognition and the erudition will happen much later, but you have to feel it in many ways. So I read this poem, and then I read the next one, and then you'll see the song versions of the book. That is, and it's the first poem in this book. That is because you hear the sound of a lone rustling leaf. You hear the sea. That is because I consider the sea silent. You hear its silence in my studio. That is, and because of that, the silent will not empty the sea of its leaves. And the next one's called Banyan. You must have seen the banyan tree. It's an extraordinary tree which sort of larger than life, and then once it grows older, all the tertiary branches and roots go downward and then touch the ground and become secondary root systems. So when it becomes really old, it's like this big hive, a cave. So as kids, we used to play hide and seek. There were many banyan trees around in Delhi and elsewhere. And that's how the poem took shape. But of course, it's about a lot of other things as well. But the beautiful architecture of the poem, the banyan tree itself is like stalactites and stalagmites, And when the two, I remember from geography lessons, when the stalactite and a stalagmite meet, it becomes a hollow what? Hollow something, it's called. But this is only quiz knowledge, Sometimes people are very in and about these very specific things like, what is half a comma? Banyan. And it's shaped in a way that it mimics the whole architecture of the tree itself, and it's one long line. Banyan. As winter secrets melt with the purple sun, what is revealed is electric. Notes tune unknown scales, syntax alters tongues, terracotta melts white, banyan ribbons into armatures as branch roots twist, meeting soil in a circle. Circuits glazed on the clock carry alphabets for a calligrapher's nib, italicized in invisible ink, letters never posted, cartographer's map uncharted, as phrases fold, so do veils. And you'll hear the song version. I didn't have any say again. This is an independently done thing. Heather and I haven't met yet. She lives in Washington State. She heard me on a Zoom program, and then she ordered the book, and then she started doing this project. So she's done about 4 or 5 songs, but I just thought I'd play 2 of them.
Because you hear the sound of a lone rustling leaf, you hear the sea. Because I consider the sea silent, you hear its silence in my studio. And because of that, the silence will not empty the sea of its leaves. And because of that, the silence will not empty the sea of its leaves. Because you hear the sound of a lone rustling leaf, you hear the sea. Because I consider the sea winter secrets melt with the purple sun. What is revealed is electric. What is revealed is electric. Notes tune, unknown scales, syntax alters tones. Terracotta mouths white. What is revealed is electric. What is revealed is electric. Banyan ribbons into auditors as branches twist, meet in soil and circle, circles placed under cloth. Carry alphabets for a calligrapher's near. What is revealed is electric. What is revealed is electric. Italicized, invisible ink, letters never posted, photographer's lab, uncharted, as phrases fall, so do veils, as phrases fall, so do veils. What is revealed is electric. What is revealed is electric. What is revealed is electric. What is revealed is electric.
So I think I'll read just one more poem. Yeah, we're doing okay with time, and end it with, I just met in the dining room in the afternoon 3 colleagues of yours who were visiting from Nepal. So I promised them a poem because the last poem, which you will see on the screen, is set in the high Himalayas, and that's called Prayer Flag. But before that, I'll just read one more poem. The book ends, of course, with one of my favorite poets, Miloš, Česlav Miloš. The book ends this volume. And again, I have to read it out because, just the way poets talk about hope in a subtle manner, I wish humanity can sort of follow their path. And I just quote, "My generation was lost, cities too, and nations. But all that a little later. Meanwhile, in the window, a swallow." So I'll end this reading section with this poem called Om, a cerement. Om is the first sound of the universe. It's also the sound of the womb. And if you remember T.S. Eliot, he ends that poem, Om Shanti, 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 peace. And so I thought it would be very appropriate for Schumacher, Dartington, Tagore, Elmhurst, Satish, and all of you, because it's all about that phrase and the recoiling of the same phrase, which acts as a talismanic echo. It opens with a little phrase from Goethe, and also in the poem I quote a very old friend who is no more, and he's a wonderful, wonderful poet called Agha Shahid Ali. He was from Kashmir, but he made his name in America. And his first book was called Country Without a Post Office. Of course, he was referring to Kashmir and so on. Om, a cerement. Architecture of frozen music, and that's by Goethe. In my city, I'm surrounded by constant cries of the dying, burning pyres heaving under burden of wood, smoke, and bones, wailing summed up by sonic notes of Om. Civilization's first sound, Sanskrit syllable echoing a conch shell's harmonic mapping, its involute spiral geometry holding within and emanating airborne sonar screams. My ancestors, grandmothers, mother, blew into the smooth shell cupped in their palms, held intimately as if it were a talisman, a prayer, a pranayam in yoga's daily ritual. But breathing is a privilege these days. Pandemic struck, oxygen deprived, my friends perish, the country buckles airless. Even an exquisite cerement lacks the sheen or wax to wrap the contours of a corpse now. Each day as I write endless condolence notes, etching dirge-like couplets on gravestones, my city continues to be dug up, not to make space for burial sites, but for palaces of illusion. An architecture of frozen music, greed, calumny. A country without a government, a country without a post office, Shahid laments. Let me cry out in that void, say it as I can, I write on that void. Om celebration now, an unceasing requiem. Yet we chant in hope for peace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you. And the last poem is the one you'll just see, which is a very short film. It's called Prayer Flag. It takes off from here, and it's very Schumacher-oriented, I think.
Om Mani Padme Hum. Oh, the jewel in the lotus. 1. Manas Sarovar, Mount Kailash. Frayed, flapping in the high winds, prayer flags gently unravel. Homage to the day's first light. But today the dawn is not as bright, though heavy, brooding, silver grey like the lake's shimmering glass top. No one is here except for a woman staring far away, wrapped in her sanctity of continuous linen, her own sari like a prayer flag, though devoid of any color. She isn't mourning or crying, just gazing fixedly into the water's changing glimmer as the sky's wet weight and the shore's rocky line meet, their edges meanderingly melting into the lake itself. I stood far behind her, behind everything she saw. She was only an accidental figure in the widescreen frame. Unlike her, I was looking skywards through the prayer flag's translucent cotton, counting each thread of each piece of cloth that wove private stories whispered only to me. Weather-worn, strung across canted multiple horizons, I tried to map their own geographies, each an island, each with its own terrain, texture, inscription, and scripture. Found on the highest points on land, as close to the sky as is possible, these magic carpets, shapes caught on an unintentional clothesline, were more meaningful to me than this vast monastic scenery. How each flag, each one must have preserved secrets that only their owners knew. How each a talisman exuded safety and calm, shrouding away grief for the briefest while when one forgets everything, real, imagined, and just dreams. My own piece of cloth that I once tied onto this line wasn't visible to me now. But that did not matter. I found strength in this procession of private passion, in these flags' lack of starch or hierarchy. Their stories passed down by one flag to another, toggled hand in hand through time and age, just like my pet yellow butterfly who infused each flower in my garden with the gift of life without any show or fair. I like the transparent quiet here. I also like the wind's occasional sound, its severe current tearing through the flag's heart, picking out the perfect pitch and melody. A memory now, a still, framed, not revealing to the world what I had once seen. The panorama's generosity, its wild, stark untouchability, how each story stitched and preserved like the jewel in the lotus, its crystal fine edges caressed by petaled soft skin, until everything folds inward, like a fetus in a womb, a toppled, misplaced comma, my own implanted memory. And then they bloom, fanning outward, each flag, strand, story, each private grief and pleasure, chanting noiselessly in the mountains' silent winds.
Thank you, Sudeep, for this wonderful poetic feast, which was wonderful.
My pleasure, thank you. Thanks for your patience.
I'm going to be very brief before we open for question answer. Sudeep, in the more or less last poem, talked about Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. In the context of climate change, and post COP26, which the economist has called cop out. It was a bit of cop out. I think the Shanti, Shanti, Shanti is very relevant. And that's where I think the people's movement at the grassroots level has to be built. And then eventually that might become more mainstream. The Shanti, as Sudeep announced and pronounced and articulated 3 times. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. First Shanti is to make peace within yourself. If you are not at peace, you have no peace of mind, you cannot make peace in the world. So your journey of transformation, your pilgrimage to peace begins in your heart, in your consciousness, in your spirit, and in your imagination. And that's where poetry stems from, the imagination. So make peace with yourself. Then second peace goes outwards. The inner peace goes to outer peace. And that is peace with humanity. In the name of religion, politics, nationality, race, gender, we quarrel, fight, kill, demolish each other. And so our peace, if we are at peace in our heart, radiates into the world, into human world. And then we celebrate the diversity of race, color, gender, politics, nationality, language, religion, whatever the diversity there is, we celebrate and not fight. And the third piece, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The third piece is going beyond humans. Peace with nature. At the moment, the climate change is a clear sign of war with nature. The way we have treated our nature, environment. First of all, we thought that humans and nature are separate. So humans can do to nature what we like. We are the superior species. We can dominate, we can exploit, we can subjugate, we can destroy the rainforest, we can poison the soil, we can pollute the oceans, fill the rivers with sewage. Whatever we have done, they are all acts of war with nature. And therefore the third piece is peace with nature, peace with the earth. We are nature. And I think in these poems, that unity of life, the unity of spirit, is the underlying theme. So when we are able to stop this war against nature, war against people, and war against ourselves, that is the wholeness, the Om, the holistic paradigm, the totality, the omnipresent, the omniscient, is Amen. That's Om. So I think those 3 words which Sudeep in his poem brought to us, Om, Shanti, 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 are poetic, imaginative, but also very practical. And they are very relevant to the climate change we are talking about. And I would like to say that like doctors take Hippocratic oath when they leave their university and college, not only doctors should take Hippocratic oath, but also politicians, business leaders, economists, scientists. Everybody needs to take this Hippocratic oath of doing no harm. Doctors take this oath, first do no harm. That's a Hippocratic oath, very simple.
Why only doctors? What do we have this right to wage war and destroy nature and be violent, harmful to other humans and harming to ourselves? So I think this peace, 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 shanti, 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 is a kind of Western expression for that. It's Hippocratic oath. Do no harm. That's the peace. Do no harm. So if all politicians and business leaders and economists and scientists and technological people, all of us, took that oath of doing no harm, then I think we will have a very clear solution in the future and even the present for climate change. That to me is a kind of very simple way forward. At the moment what people are talking about is just changing one form of energy to another form, which is good, renewable energy, but we also need to have a different value system. It's not a technological fix that we can do. Technological solution can only go that far and not very far. So we need to change our thinking, our values, our worldview, our consciousness. And that to me is a kind of climate change thing. And the Anthropocene is a very kind of revealing and telling word that SUDEEP has put as the title of his book. It's a very, that we have changed the whole world into human-centered Anthropocene, human-dominated world. Something like 70 to 80% of the world is human-dominated. If you took all the human numbers and all the farms we do and all the oceans we trail upon and all the animals we keep, from dogs and cats and cows and horses and pigs and chickens and all the other human-related and human-reared animals, 70 to 80% of the world is dominated by human species. One species. That is a kind of catastrophic situation in which we are. And so this Anthropocene and this climate issue is beautifully presented poetically, but also very pragmatically and very practically. We can all be part of this transformation, this change, this pilgrimage towards peace. And as we take Hippocratic oath and do no harm, we also need to say to ourselves that we need to reduce our footprint on the planet Earth. At the moment we seem to have no limit. More and more and more, and there is no limit, unlimited economic growth. And economic growth has become the end in itself. Nature is a means to an end of economic growth. Humans have become a resource for the economic growth. So humans and nature, and humans are also nature, there is no separation, have become the sacrificial animals at the altar of economic growth. This unlimited, without any constraint, this goes on. And that's a real Anthropocene. And therefore, we need to change this economic growth, production, consumption, money, profit, everything should be means to the end of maintaining the integrity of nature, integrity of the planet, and integrity of humanity, and a unity of life, and dignity of life, dignity of all life, human and other than human. Unless we have that change of our perspective, that nature and humans are not means to an end, but economy and money and profit and consumption production are the means for the well-being of humans and planet. Unless we change this concept and remove the confusion between means and ends, why we have economic growth? Is it benefiting nature? Is it benefiting humans? Or is it only benefiting some, or not even benefiting these very rich, wealthy people? There's an illusion that they are benefiting. They are not at peace either. They are not very happy. Most of the people are not very happy. And so if we can change that, then I think we can address this Anthropocene and make it into maybe more Metropocene or Planetocene. That will be another new era that we have to create, and hopefully not too late because the time is running out, and the COP26 has been a bit of cop-out, but we at the grassroots level take responsibility ourselves and not wait for Modi, Boris Johnson, Biden, Putin, Xi Jinping, and all the other leaders of the world to save the planet. We have to take responsibility and do something like that. That's my contribution to Anthropocene.
Yes. Yes. How can you not agree?
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions because I think, the more interactive it is, the better it is.
Absolutely. So anybody would like to raise the hand and please ask a question. Who is? Yes, there is a hand there. Can you speak loudly?
No, there's a
microphone. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Hello. I was wondering what you see the role of poets, artists, creatives in facing the climate crisis.
Well, terribly important actually what we do. By virtue of what we do, it's in a sense, it's much more understated. Our kind of diplomacy is in the margins, it's understated, it's subtle. But because of that, it's more permanent and solid and effective. Even though the capitalistic forces in the short term suppresses the arts, so to speak. But that's what it is. In fact, the introduction to my book, I wrote a little meditative essay just to put things in context. And the role of the artist is not to look away. And it's a quote from Akira Kurosawa's words. Akira Kurosawa is, of course, the great Japanese filmmaker. So we as citizens, we as artists, we as human beings, we as planetary beings need to take upon ourselves the role of being responsible, really. And a sense of camaraderie needs to be there. All this is nothing new. It was all there. The older cultures still have it. I live in Delhi. I live in a very kind of bipolar space where the medieval and the ancient and the super modern coexist side by side. And rather than treating that as a sort of conflict, if we can embrace both sides in a sort of harmonic manner, then I think it's just the way to go, really. And it's not that difficult. First, we need to look inward, and then the inner self tells us what to do. That's how nature works in any case. What is nature? The macrocosm is nature, the microcosm. The same nature is within us. If you take the idea of fractals as a concept, what is it? It's the larger patterns being exactly repeated in the sort of micro patterns. Snowflakes, the DNA structure of snowflake is a good example. Or when you see the coasts from high above, it's a good example of what fractals are. So these are just things that one needs to look at and just be aware that there are other people around us who breathe, and it's okay to hold and hug. It's okay not to have tight silo-like folders and can I call you? So it's a small thing like people find it rude if you pick up the phone and call them. You have to text them 3 times to ask for permission to have a date to make a simple phone call. Now, how ridiculous is that? Can't you just drop in at someone's house and say, hey, listen, I'm really tired, I need a drink or I need a cup of tea or something. No. You open your Filofaxes are old too, Google Calendar or whatever it is, and 10 weekends down the road, I don't even know whether I'm going to be alive. They want to come and see my partner and, I don't even know whether we'll be together, Life is so unpredictable. But right now, if we can't just open our arms and say, yes, let's just celebrate. That's all it is. Just be open, be vulnerable, but be sensible. Sensible is important.
Very good. And if you look at the history of all the great musicians and poets, many of them have been very active. And even in our time, John Lennon was a great activist, talking about peace and love and all the things, and Joan Baez and many singers, and even Picasso, great painter, his Guernica, one painting, Guernica, I think changed the consciousness about peace and war. So I think the poets and artists are as much citizen as anybody else. Moreover, we are all artists. Art is not a special kind of person, but every person is a special kind of artist. And we all need to be artists. We all need to live like an artist. We all need to live like a poet. Poet is also great poets, SUDEEP Sen and many other poets. But poetry, the word poet comes from Greek language, which means maker. And it's beautiful that somebody can make poem on a page. That's beautiful. But a maker is always makes things with his or her own imagination, his own creativity, with his own heart and love in it. It's not a profession, it's a vocation. And therefore, everyone who can make something with their own imagination and creativity and inspiration, you can become a poet. So I would like to see everyone being a poet, everyone being an artist.
It's not very practical to live, of course, if you just rely on poetry. But of course, philosophically, of course, that's really where our heart should be. Yeah. Because I think the whole idea of intelligence and needs to kick in as well. This whole idea of a poet living in a garret and looking at the moon or his love lawn, and you write these verses. All that is also part of it. But you have to be also very, very anchored on Mother Earth. Exactly. How will you feel the pulse of the earth? How do you feel the corpuscle of the blood flow within you? If you just kiss, and it's a French kiss, and the transference is only saliva, it's too superficial and, can be yucky.
Yeah.
Or not, depending on the length and breadth of the kiss. However, if the kiss is connected at the level of not just the skin, but the soul, then the vibrations are completely different. You get goosebumps. And where does that happen? Because the lip is actually talking to the brain, then it goes into the heart. Our brilliant neural system is more fascinating and more advanced than any of the robotic sciences you can think of. Exactly. It's, after all, the humans have made it. People forget that we rely on technology to the point that you become slaves to technology. But who's created the technology? It's the humans. So if we say that we are more intelligent than the computer, and emotional intelligence is important, not just cerebral intelligence. So it's the yin and yang. It's like, to use a music terminology, if you have the big mixing board with 1,000 knobs and so on, and how the bass is on one end, and the treble is on one end, and the mid-range is in the middle, and then there are all these other sonic buttons. It depends on the kind of song you want to create, so you just adjust those volume knobs so that, why? Harmony, rhythm. You're back to the same essential things. All the waves, you're talking about the third Shanti. The third Shanti is basically waves emanating out to the universe. Yeah. And the universe is sending waves back. And let's not forget, what are we? We're just a pinprick. Without the sun and the solar system and the gravitational forces, nothing, we are not that clever, really. We don't know a lot of what's out there. So if we just are a bit more human and humble, humility, all the H's, it's easy. It's easy. It's actually very easy.
Yeah.
Just open your arms.
Einstein said that any fool can make things complicated. It requires a genius to make things simple.
Not just that. I remember I went to a symposium. Yeah. I went to a symposium. This was a very high-flying literary conference, and I was invited as a poet to read. Usually in literature conferences, all the academics are very erudite, and from morning to evening they present these grand papers, some of it really, really important and very, very engaging. And then, and in the evening, usually they have the writers do their reading, the fiction writers do their, usually after a glass of wine, and it's much more relaxed, and that's the lovely part of a literature conference, if it's held like that. And I remember sitting completely accidentally in one of the seminar rooms, and someone was presenting a paper on my work. I couldn't understand anything, I said, have I written this book? It was so full of polyphonic, polysyllabic jargon that, it was all so confused. And that lady was speaking to just her supervisor so that she could just get a PhD very quickly,
Degree, yeah.
So if you get trapped in that system, I'm not saying that is not important. Intellectual rigor is equally important as the artistic imagination, but calibrate it in a way that makes us human.
Okay. Let's get one or two more questions. Yeah, there. Microphone there. Here, yeah, you. Yeah, you.
This might be a quick question, but you're quite funny, and I'm wondering, your poetry is very it's very beautiful and very deep, and it has a bit of there's like a depth and a little bit of sadness, I suppose, to it. And I'm wondering, like, how did you end up going with that medium to express what you're trying to express in the world? And where do you think humor plays a role in all of this?
See, I think it's a very, very good observation. I mean, it's not even an observation. Anybody can sort of figure out. My poetry is so morosely deep and displacedly sad. But it's very fun, difficult to write funny poetry. You have to have a particular sense of humor. I can crack a joke and, we can laugh and all that, but serious laughter is actually quiet. And so it's a very different space. Humor writing is a very different thing. And I really laud people who can sort of
Mullah
be
Nasruddin.
witty.
Mullah Nasruddin.
Yes. And there's so many. I mean, Stephen Fry, for instance, is a good example of being witty, knowledgeable, and superbly funny. But he doesn't write poetry. He does other things, So humor is very important. And in my poetry, if you see, the humor exists, but in parentheses. It exists on the places on the page where it's not inked, because the white spaces on the page are equally important in terms of the tension between the word and the page as the printed part of the page, which is the text itself. And all the humor is very, very subtle in that sense. It's, depends on the person. I like that to be slightly understated, because otherwise it becomes slapstick, I mean, it's a laugh a minute, and
Okay, let's get one or two more questions. Who next?
No.
Any hands? Yeah.
Yeah, hi, SUDEEP. So you said you're from Delhi, and I was wondering if you've noticed any change over the last few years in the way people are reacting to the environmental degradation around them, and how do you yourself square up with a day where you're facing catastrophic pollution?
Yeah, so Delhi at the moment is in deep trouble, because in the winter months, the pollution levels are such that it's unbreathable, and I'm asthmatic. So in fact, I'm very lucky that just happened to be here. I actually breathe better here without taking my Ventolin puffs. And even that is not enough there. So part of the problem is, of course, the way the geographical terrain of Delhi is, because in the winter month it inverts and there's a cover and the things get strapped. But there's a lot of other problems too. But there's stubble burning in the adjacent states, and they don't listen to you because it's part of the trade. Emissions from cars, pollution. The local government, the Aam Aadmi Party, which is very different from the BJP, they introduced a very simple ploy, which is like you have congestion charge in central London. They said only the odd number car plates can go in one day, drive one day, and the other one the other day. Immediately, within 2 days, the air of Delhi was markedly clearer and better. It's actually very simple, but people just don't want to give up their conveniences. Just like in America, I mean, there's such a twisted idea of free speech, because that's when we don't use our head. Free speech, I'm all for. But listen to science too, I mean, it just makes sense to get your vaccination, because that is better than dying. Or wearing your mask is a better idea than not wearing a mask, unless, of course, you're already jabbed and so on, and you're sitting, with the distance and so on. So in India, what they've done is initially, we went through a really bad phase. I used to hear stories from my grandparents about the partition of India when India and Pakistan and Bangladesh to be all separated, and there was pillage and killing and all sorts of things. So that was only stories I've heard and films I've seen. But in my lifetime, for the first time last year, I saw dead bodies being burnt on the sides of the road because they had run out of space in the cemetery, cremation grounds. So parking lots were being turned into cremation grounds, sides of the road. It was just something that you can't believe that was happening. But finally what they did, of course, and the other irony was, we make a lot of the vaccine for the rest of the world. So initially, the first wave didn't hit us that badly. It hit Italy, started off with Italy and so on. So we exported a lot of our vaccine. And then we didn't have enough for our own people. So there was that too. And in fact, Trump came to India for one day, and our Prime Minister built this huge stadium just to have him speak for 1 hour. And the corridor was crazy. They spent so much money building a corridor so that, you can't see the degradation outside. So he zooms in his Air Force One, comes in, gives a speech, and of course mispronounces all the words. If you look at that YouTube speech, it's just shameful. In any case, and he said that, if you stop sending us vaccine, we won't do the trade deals that I've come to do. That's the way power works. So I think it's about just being responsible. I mean, ultimately, educated people I know, my friends, families have been split because of our political leanings. It's just become such a strange, toxic, divided world because people don't use their head and the heart properly. It's only just ants. And it's easy, just chill, take a laxative.
Also, I think the problem is not only Delhi. Most big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Tokyo, big cities, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, because they have become so centralized, everybody driving into the center and then going back. But old London used to be a kind of a collection of villages. Camden Town, Kentish Town, Hampstead Village. They were villages, and each village, each town had their own little center, and you could walk to your shop, you could walk to your library, to walk to your doctor. But why we have this centralized system in big cities where everybody has to come to the center, to the bank or Oxford Street or whatever, and then go back to suburbs? So that, I think, we need to redesign our cities again and make cities greener, why we have sent nature into exile.
You know what I think? Yeah. Suddenly it just strikes me when you're talking about centralizing things, it's a gigabyte disease.
Yeah.
Everything has to be stacked.
Yeah.
And maximum amount of storage space and energy has to be stacked in the small space. It's not scientifically possible. It's possible only to a limit. It will explode or implode.
Yeah.
It has to.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
also
why you need that.
India is making villages ignored, and so all the no jobs, agriculture is being destroyed, and so people are coming into cities, Mumbai and Kolkata and Delhi and all these Chennai, big cities, are becoming unlivable. So I think we need to redesign our cities and urban landscape. Maybe we can have one last question, and then I'll ask Prabhu to say a few words. One last question. Anybody? Yes.
I'm just wondering what your vision of the future is in view of the fact that artificial intelligence is advancing at a very fast rate, and we're probably going to have robots doing an awful lot of jobs very soon, and we're already having it to some degree, but not, it's going to happen exponentially. What do you see, what's your vision in view of the fact that we probably can't stop that happening? Or do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, the comment would simply be, use what is necessary. Just to give you a small example, I love the tactility of a typewriter and the sort of page and handwriting. I still use a fountain pen and so on. So all that is great, but when you're writing a book, the computer is very useful, So all the drafts are in one place and so on. But the thing is to not overdo it, really. Use whatever resource is necessary for you and share it. I mean, that's the
Yes.
But
Middle way.
I think before long we'll have robots doing all the jobs in the cafes and robots doing. I mean, so.
But
many
the problem with that, right? I mean, you can't go to a bank and meet someone because you want to solve a small problem, but you have to pick up the phone and wait for hours and press 1, 2, 3 hash, and then it goes to another country to answer a simple question. You spend 2 hours of valuable time to get what? You change your PIN or something, So that's how crazy, unintelligent we have been. So that's where we have to be very sensible about brevity and swiftness, but with efficiency.
Well, maybe we can have robots doing all the jobs and we can be artists.
No.
That's it.
No.
That's not balanced.
Yeah. That's
We need the robots, we need the artists, both. We should celebrate both.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for your questions. Before we conclude the session, I will ask Prabhu Guptara, who is the publisher of the book Anthropocene, and Prabhu is also going to publish one of the books I'm editing called Regenerative Learning next year, which is a kind of part of celebration of Schumacher College's 30th anniversary. So, Prabhu, a few words from you.
Just very quickly, thank you very much, Satish. Thank you very much, Sudeep, and thank you all for coming. Just very quickly to give you the story of the publishing house. I am 72 years old, a little younger than Satish, and I started in publishing at the age of 71 in memory of my wife, who had started a small publishing firm many years ago. And that firm sort of dried up because we moved very suddenly and totally unexpectedly away from England to Switzerland. And then, of course, learning a new language, coping with children going through school in a system we did not understand, and so on, meant that it was not possible for the publishing to continue. And when she was promoted to heaven, I was, of course, in grief and shock and so on. And several months later, when I sort of began to wake up, I thought I must do something in memory of my wife. And that was the month of May. And in the month of May, it was also the month that Prime Minister Modi was re-elected Prime Minister of the country, this time with an absolute majority. He had not had an absolute majority earlier. Now he had an absolute majority. And so in my grief and so on, I was thinking, the land is going into darkness and I should be doing something about it. I don't know what. And so the two thoughts came together, and so I started the publishing house, Pippa Rand, named after my wife, Pippa Rand Books, the mission of which is to nurture democratic and humane values among Indians and those who love India. So that's Pippa Rand Books, and that is the series, that's the imprint in which Sudeep's book has been published. But this was all happening in the middle of the pandemic. And you know that everything was frozen. And so I was thinking, did I do something wrong? Did I do something stupid? How do we progress in a pandemic world where no books are being sold, where there are paper shortages and so books can't be printed? Or if they're printed, they cannot be imported or sent around because they're short of lorries, and seaports and airports are having problems importing books or handling books. And that's when I was thinking and praying about all this, that the thought occurred to me that we need a new imprint, and the new imprint in which Sudeep's book is going to be published is going to be titled Global Resilience Publishing. And it's going to be looking at global issues such as climate change, the reform of the international financial system, the reform of the United Nations, big issues like that. So we've got two completely different things.
Very good.
And may I just add as an insertion, Prabhu's last career was as a high-flying banker with a Swiss bank, UBS. So can you imagine where to? So what a thing!
What a transformation! Yes. So we can all go with the great hope that if a banker can change into a radical publisher, then robots can be defeated and humans can come back to one with nature and live in harmony, so that our Earth can evolve for billions and billions of years to come and not have this short-lived life as we predict today, that after 2050 or 2070, that they are thinking to make all this carbon zero net, etc. What we need to do is to act today, tomorrow, soon, and not put in the long grass of 2050, 2060, 2070. So with that hope, I would like to thank again our main speaker, SUDEEP Sen, with his poetry, his films, and his answering questions. And I would like to particularly also thank our organizers, Sarah, who has done efficiently and warmly this wonderful organization. Thank you very much. And all our technicians who have done all the wonderful zooming and all the arrangements. And I can't name all the people, but everyone who has supported, helped, and organized this event. Thank you very much, all our people who put on the website and everything. But most of all, I would like to thank you all for coming this evening and participating here in person, and also people who are listening on Zoom. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again. Thank you very much.